Hi, my loves. Tonight's story follows Lyra, a brilliant strategist whose work is stolen by her boss until Iris Vielle buys the company and sees everything. What begins as justice in a glass office slowly turns into a charged, careful romance about credit, power, and being truly seen. I learned to recognize the sound of Marcus taking credit for my work before I learned to recognize the feeling of wanting to leave. There was a particular lift in his voice when he stole something cleanly, a little warmth on the vowel, an almost generous pause before the punchline of an idea he had never had. He used that pause in conference rooms, on video calls, in the glossy deck reviews where the rest of us sat with laptops open and faces arranged into expressions that would not get us called difficult. The first time I noticed it, I still thought it was an accident. By the time Vielle Acquisitions bought the company, I could hear it from 20 feet away over the hiss of the espresso machine and the rain ticking against the windows. The agency occupied 2 floors of a converted warehouse in Seattle, all exposed beams and black-framed glass, and the sort of plants that looked expensive until you watched interns overwater them every Monday morning. Every surface had been designed to imply creativity without permitting disorder. Our open-plan office had bright chairs no one liked, acoustic panels shaped like clouds, and a wall of framed campaign posters from the decade when the agency had still been impressive. The posters were always lit better than the people who made them. That seemed appropriate. My desk was in the middle row, not near the windows, not near the conference rooms, exactly where a person could be essential and unseen at the same time. I had a monitor, a second monitor, a chipped mug with Lyra written on it by Danny in permanent marker after the office dishwasher ate my old one, and a row of pinned color studies above my screen. They were not supposed to be there. The official brand system lived in cloud folders and presentation templates, but I liked being able to look up and see mood before it became language. I liked the raw thing before it had to be sold. Marcus called it clutter. Lyra, he said that Tuesday morning, leaning into my desk without knocking because desks apparently could be invaded if they did not have doors. You ready for Meridian? I looked at the deck open on my screen, at slide 32, where my positioning statement sat beneath a stock image Marcus had insisted on using, despite my argument that it made a financial planning app look like a dental practice. Yes. Great. I massaged the voice a little last night. He had changed 3 adjectives and moved my name off the internal notes page. Of course, I said. He smiled, handsome in the way men became handsome when everyone had agreed not to check too closely. Marcus Vale was not related to Iris Vale, though the similarity would later give Danny several minutes of vicious pleasure. He wore navy suits with white sneakers and used people's names often enough to seem warm. Clients loved him. Senior leadership loved him. His team loved the idea of a natural disaster striking specifically his calendar. Bring your laptop in case we need numbers, he said. What he meant was, sit at the edge of the table and be useful when summoned. What I said was, sure. Danny watched him walk away from her desk across the aisle. Her expression could have curdled oat milk. You know, she said, one day I am going to bite him. Please don't. HR will ask me to make the incident report sound brand consistent. I can be brand consistent. Our brand is trauma with a sans serif font. I laughed because I had learned to laugh quietly at work, one hand over my mouth, like amusement was confidential. Danny laughed with her whole body. She was a copy lead with silver hoops, blunt bangs, and an intolerance for injustice that made her both the best person in the room and the most likely to be fired by someone with poor survival instincts. She had joined a year after me and spotted the office ecosystem in a week. By the end of her second month, she had cornered me in the break room and said, "So Marcus eats your work and calls it mentorship?" I had told her that was dramatic. She had looked at me over her paper cup of bad coffee. I write for a living. I know when a metaphor is accurate. The Meridian meeting happened in the largest conference room, the one with views of Elliott Bay, when the weather remembered we had one. That morning, the view was mostly gray water and low clouds, the city blurred by rain until Seattle looked like someone had rubbed charcoal across glass. Meridian's team arrived in expensive coats, shaking umbrellas in the reception area, smelling faintly of wet wool and citrus perfume. Marcus greeted them with both hands and a laugh I had heard him practice once before a pitch. I sat 2 seats from the end with the analysts, my laptop open, my mouth closed. The deck began with the market landscape I had built from a month of late nights and one Saturday I still resented. Marcus moved through it smoothly. He was good at presenting. That was the most irritating thing about him. If he had been visibly incompetent, the theft would have seemed comic. Instead, he was fluent enough to make mediocrity look polished, and the room rewarded him for it. We realized the opportunity wasn't to make savings feel aspirational, he said, one hand resting near the clicker, but to make restraint feel emotionally intelligent. My exact sentence, pulled from a strategy memo I had written at 1:17 in the morning while eating cereal from a mug because my dishwasher was broken and I had run out of bowls. The client leaned forward. That's exactly it, Marcus smiled. We wanted to move away from shame-based financial messaging. I watched the word enter the room and erase me. It was such a small syllable to carry that much theft. Slide followed slide. He used my framework, my phrasing, my recommended campaign arc. When the client pushed on the emotional premise, he turned slightly toward me without looking at me and said, "Lyra, do you have those behavioral segmentation numbers?" I gave the numbers. He absorbed them into his answer. Everyone nodded. Someone from Meridian said the work felt unusually human for financial tech, and Marcus gave a modest little shrug as if humanity were an accessory he had selected that morning. At the end, the client applauded. Not a standing ovation, obviously, because this was a conference room and not a war film, but the polite, delighted clap of people who believed they had just witnessed vision. Marcus lowered his chin, accepting the gratitude with tasteful reluctance. I smiled at the edge of the table. The smile cost me something. Not much in any single moment. That was the trick of it. Chronic diminishment did not arrive with a dramatic wound. It took a thin shaving each time, so thin you felt childish naming the damage, until one day you realized you had been planned down for years. After the clients left, Marcus clapped once. "Good work, everyone." Danny's eyes cut to me. Mine stayed on my laptop. Marcus stopped beside my chair. "Nice pull on the numbers." "Thanks." And the Meridian team liked the emotional intelligence angle. I think that's going to become central. It already was central. It was the spine. It was the reason the campaign worked. "Great," I said. He nodded and walked out, already calling someone else, already using a voice that meant he was turning our labor into his reputation in real time. Danny waited until he was gone. "I'm going to bite him today." "You'll chip a tooth." "I have dental." "You have rage." "I contain multitudes." We returned to our desks. I answered emails. I revised copy that did not need revising because a client's nephew had opinions. I wrote a new positioning paragraph for a brand of canned cocktails and let Marcus tell the account team it came out of a conversation he had been mulling. At 6:40, the office lights shifted into their evening mode, warmer and sadder, as if the building itself had accepted that we lived there now. People left in waves. The performative energy drained first. The panic stayed later. I told myself I was making a strategic choice. That was what competent women called exhaustion when we wanted it to sound less like defeat. I had rent, student loans, a mother who asked careful questions about my career and heard careful answers back, and a resume full of work that looked impressive, as long as no one asked who had received the applause. Confronting Marcus would require proof, allies, timing, and the willingness to be labeled difficult by people who benefited from my silence. Leaving would require a market where agencies were not all variations on the same machine. So I compartmentalized. I made folders, I made dinner, I slept badly. I told myself invisibility was not the same as disappearance if I could still feel the shape of myself inside it. That was before the email. It landed at 9:03 on a Thursday, with the subject line, "A New Chapter for Astor Lane Creative." Anyone who has worked in an office knows that phrase has never preceded anything calm. Conversation stopped in sections. You could hear keyboards stutter, chairs roll back, the tiny electronic pings of people forwarding a message everyone already had. I opened it because there was no dignity in pretending not to. "Dear team," the email began, "I will not insult you by reproducing the rest of it from memory." Corporate language had a way of entering my brain and dissolving into fog. The important pieces were these. We had been acquired. The buyer was Vielle Acquisitions. Leadership was excited about the future. There would be an assessment period, and our commitment to creativity remained unchanged, which meant someone had already begun changing it. Danny appeared beside my desk so quickly I suspected she had hurdled furniture. "Have you heard of Vielle?" she asked. No. I have 3 tabs open and my blood pressure is either rising or becoming art. I turned my chair. That fast? I was born for panic research. She set her laptop on the corner of my desk. The first tab showed a clean website with minimal copy and no smiling team photo. Vielle Acquisitions specialized in acquiring distressed or mismanaged creative, design, and communications companies. Their case studies were almost aggressively discreet. They did not boast about scale or synergy. They used words like talent retention, attribution audit, and structural correction. The second tab was a trade article about a small brand studio in San Francisco that had nearly collapsed under bad management before Vielle acquired it, removed 3 executives, elevated 2 senior strategists, and doubled revenue in 18 months. The third tab was a Forbes interview with Iris Vielle. The photograph loaded first. I remember being annoyed by my own reaction to it. Iris Vielle was seated in profile near a window, wearing a dark suit without ornament, one hand resting on the arm of the chair, her gaze angled toward the interviewer, with the calm of a person who did not perform approachability for people who had not earned it. She looked early 40s, maybe, with dark hair cut cleanly just below her jaw, and a face that would have seemed severe if not for the intelligence in her eyes. Not warmth, exactly. Attention. There was a difference, and something in me recognized it before I had language for why. Danny scrolled. "Listen to this." "I don't buy companies," she read aloud, lowering her voice into what she apparently imagined billionaire-adjacent precision sounded like. "I extract people from structures that don't deserve them." I stared at the quote. Danny looked at me. "Lyra." "Don't." I didn't say anything. You said my name in italics. Because a woman in a murder suit just described your entire employment situation in Forbes. She doesn't know me. Not yet. The office around us had shifted into the strange chemical weather of acquisition panic. Account managers moved between desks in whisper clusters. Designers pretended to work while refreshing LinkedIn. Our CFO walked too quickly toward the conference rooms. Marcus stood near the kitchen with 2 directors, smiling in a way that showed too many teeth. He looked unsettled, which gave the morning its first honest pleasure. I read the Forbes quote again. "I extract people from structures that don't deserve them." It was a beautiful sentence if you were not the structure. It was probably a ruthless sentence if you were. "What do you think it means?" I asked. Danny's expression softened, which was worse than her anger. "I think it means something in this building is going to get opened up." I wanted to say I did not hope. Hope felt too large and too humiliating, like arriving overdressed to a party no one had invited you to. But something had changed in the air, a pressure shift before weather. I could feel it along my skin. Not optimism. Attention. As if somewhere outside the building, someone had turned toward us and was looking carefully. Marcus called an emergency team huddle at 11. He told us acquisitions were normal, change was inevitable, and our best strategy was to continue delivering excellence. He used the word excellence 4 times and transparency twice. He did not mention attribution. He did not look at me. For the next week, the agency behaved like a body waiting for test results. Viel's assessment team requested documents, project histories, client feedback, original strategy drafts, revision logs, timesheets, internal org charts, and something called contribution mapping, which made Marcus's left eyelid twitch when the request appeared in our department channel. People who had been loud became careful. People who had been careful became quiet. Danny began calling Viel Acquisitions the emotional audit police. They asked for original working files on Meridian, she told me one afternoon, swiveling in her chair. Original, working, files. That could mean anything. It means they want metadata, baby. Never call me baby in relation to metadata again. She pointed at me with a pen. You're afraid to enjoy this. I'm afraid to misread it. No, you're afraid to want something fair because if it doesn't happen, you'll have to grieve it. I looked at her. She shrugged. I contain multitudes and also insight. I returned to the deck on my screen, but the sentence stayed under my ribs. It was inconvenient having a friend who loved me with accuracy. Danny saw the bruise beneath the bruise. She knew I had survived the agency by telling myself fairness was a childish category, that work was work, that recognition was optional if the paycheck cleared. She also knew those were lies I had upholstered well enough to sit on. The first day Iris Viel entered the agency, it was raining so hard the windows looked less like glass than water held in place by architecture. She arrived at 10 with 3 people behind her, and no entourage energy at all. I had expected drama, though I would have denied it. Someone with a Forbes quote like that should have made an entrance. Instead, she stepped out of the elevator in a charcoal coat, closed her umbrella carefully, and listened to our CEO greet her with the strained cheer of a man who had not slept. She was less corporate cold than her photograph. Not warmer exactly, but more present. She did not sweep the room. She noticed it. There was an unsettling difference. Her gaze moved over desks, pinned sketches, half-erased whiteboards, people pretending not to stare. She asked specific questions of specific people. What percentage of revision cycles originated from client uncertainty versus internal leadership changes? Who owned the first strategic draft before creative development? How many campaigns had changed lead attribution between kickoff and final presentation? She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The room reorganized itself around the possibility that she might ask you something and expect the truth. Marcus became charming at a frequency detectable by bats. When the assessment group reached our row, I lowered my eyes to my monitor with the instinct of an animal that had survived by not moving. Danny, naturally, straightened like she was about to witness a trial. Iris stopped at my desk. Not for long. Long enough? Her eyes moved to the studies pinned above my monitor. Meridian's muted green and pale sand, a hospitality concept in bruised plum and brass, a nonprofit campaign built around hand-drawn shapes I had made on a Sunday and never shown anyone outside internal review. She looked at them the way I looked at weather when I was trying to decide whether an umbrella was worth carrying. Not admiring. Reading. Lyra, Marcus said behind her, too quickly. One of our senior brand strategists. Very dependable. Dependable was what people called you when they wanted to praise your usefulness without acknowledging your judgment. Iris did not turn to him. What are you building now? For half a second, I thought she had asked Marcus. Then I realized her eyes were on me. I cleared my throat. A repositioning proposal for Halcyon House, regional boutique hotels trying to recover after an expansion that made them look generic. What is the premise? I could have given the safe answer. Local intimacy at scale. Heritage without nostalgia. The kind of phrases agencies bred in captivity. Instead, I heard myself say that people are tired of being treated like demographics when they travel. They want evidence that someone expected them as a person, not a category. Iris was still for a moment. Why this feeling? Why now? Nobody had ever asked me that question like the answer mattered. Not, what's the insight? Not, can we make it more ownable? Not, is this distinctive enough for the deck? Why this feeling? Why now? I forgot to be invisible. Because everything is frictionless now, I said. Check-in, check-out, recommendations, upgrades. The industry keeps removing human contact and calling it luxury. But people don't only want efficiency, they want relief. They want to arrive somewhere and feel that the place has a memory even if they don't. Halcyon can't outspend the chains, but it can outnotice them. The office seemed quieter than it had a right to be. My own voice sounded unfamiliar, not louder, just less trimmed. Iris looked at the pinned studies again. Outnotice them, she said, as if testing the weight of it. That's the line. My face warmed. Marcus laughed lightly. Lyra has a knack for those little turns of phrase. Iris finally looked at him. Only for a second. It was a clean look, almost mild, and somehow Marcus stopped smiling. Then she turned back to me. Send me the working draft, please. Not the presentation. The draft. Yes, I said. Thank you. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. I thought about it for 4 days. That was not an exaggeration. I thought about it while brushing my teeth, while waiting for the bus under a leaking shelter, while standing in my kitchen watching pasta water boil too aggressively. Why this feeling? Why now? The question followed me because it had not been a test. It had been an invitation, to be precise. I had built a whole private religion around precision. It was the only place I still allowed myself to be ambitious. 2 weeks after Iris Vielle asked me why that feeling and why now, the restructure was announced. It happened on a Monday because companies enjoyed ruining the beginning of things. Calendar invites appeared first, then disappeared, then appeared again with different attendees. 2 conference rooms were blocked all morning. People walked in pale and came out paler, or did not come out because they had been escorted through the side elevators with cardboard boxes and private severance folders. It was brutal and weirdly quiet. No one cried theatrically. The office absorbed people's futures in soft carpet and glass. Marcus vanished into conference room B at 10:40. Danny rolled her chair to the edge of the aisle and whispered, I am not proud of the person I am becoming, but I am extremely invested in the outcome. Don't stare. I'm not staring. I'm witnessing capitalism having a plot twist. At 11:12, Marcus came out with our CEO and a woman from Vielle's team. His face had lost its practiced softness. He did not look at the open office. He did not look at me. He walked to his office, closed the door, and spent 17 minutes inside. When he left, he carried no box. That made it worse somehow, more final. His name disappeared from Slack before lunch. By 2, the org chart had been updated. It was as if someone had removed a load-bearing lie and the building was deciding whether to collapse or breathe. The office buzzed with anxiety and released tension in equal measure. Some people were angry, some were frightened, some were suddenly animated by the private hope that incompetence might not be immortal after all. I sat at my desk and pretended to review a client brief while the world rearranged in my peripheral vision. Then an assistant I did not recognize appeared beside me. Lyra. Yes, Ms. Vielle would like to see you. Danny's chair squeaked. My body became very aware of itself. Hands, throat, knees, pulse. Now. If you're available. There were no circumstances under which I was unavailable to the woman who had just erased Marcus from the org chart. I stood, smoothed a wrinkle from my trousers, and walked toward the glass conference room at the far end of the floor. People did not openly watch me. That was worse. Their not watching was so attentive it had mass. Iris stood by the window with the city behind her, one hand in the pocket of a dark suit, her hair tucked behind one ear. The rain had eased into a mist that blurred the skyline. On the table lay a thin stack of folders, a tablet, and the Halcyon House draft I had sent her, printed and marked in a neat hand. The assistant closed the door behind me. "Sit, if you like," Iris said. I did not sit. My legs might have interpreted permission as collapse. She noticed. Of course she noticed. She did not comment. "I've been watching your work," she said. "Not, I've heard good things. Not Marcus spoke highly of you. Not, you seem promising. I've been watching your work." My mouth went dry. "My work?" "Yes." "For how long?" 8 months. I thought of every deck, every internal memo, every line Marcus had repackaged, every idea I had buried under team language because I had been trained to make theft convenient. 8 months felt impossible. 8 months felt like a light had been on in a room I thought was empty. "Why did you watch that long before making a move?" I asked, before caution could make the question smaller. The room seemed to sharpen around it. Iris's expression changed so subtly I would have missed it weeks earlier. Not guilt, not alarm. Something more complicated, as if I had found the one door in her careful internal architecture that did not open smoothly. Before we continue, I want you to know that the version you are hearing here keeps the romance focused on emotion, tension, and the slow burn between these two women. If you want the fuller, more intimate version of Lyra and Iris's story, with the private moments left bolder and uncensored, you can find it on my Patreon. Your support helps make more stories like this possible, and it means a lot if you choose to continue there. "Because I was not certain the first month," Iris said, as if the answer had been waiting for honesty to become unavoidable. "And after I was certain, I was not yet in a position to act without making your life worse. There are ways to intervene that make the person you intend to help pay the cost. I needed the acquisition to be viable on its own terms. I needed evidence strong enough that removing Marcus would not look like preference or impulse. And I needed to know whether Astor Lane was worth saving as a structure, not merely as a container for people who deserved better." "How?" I asked. "Revision histories, client feedback, original documents, a few people who were more honest than cautious." Her gaze held mine. "Patterns are not as difficult to identify as people like Marcus hope." I almost laughed. It came out as a breath. "Your role is changing," she said. "Not today in title. Titles are easy and often dishonest, but effective immediately. Your strategic work comes directly to me during the transition. No intermediary attribution. No filtering through people whose primary skill is proximity to talent." The words arrived slowly, as if some part of me insisted on inspecting each one before allowing it inside. Then Iris said, "Now you only answer to me." From anyone else, it would have sounded like possession. From her, standing in that glass room with my stolen work marked carefully on the table, it sounded like a door unlocking. My hands trembled once at my sides. I folded them together before the tremor could become visible. Iris saw it anyway. Her voice softened by half a degree. "This is not a punishment, Lyra." "I know." "Do you?" I looked at the printed draft. My own words had been underlined in blue ink. Outnoticed them. Human contact as proof of care. Memory without nostalgia. The marks were precise, not decorative. She had read it. Really read it. A ridiculous pressure built behind my eyes. "I'm trying to," I said. Something shifted in her expression. Not pity. I would have hated pity, and I think she knew that without needing to be told. It was recognition, which was more dangerous. "Good," she said. "Then we'll start there." That evening, after the office emptied into rain and group chats and whatever private versions of relief or terror people carried home, I called my mother from the bus stop. I meant to tell her Marcus was gone, with the kind of dry humor that would make the story manageable. Instead, when she answered and said, "Hello, my love," I started crying. Not dramatically, not beautifully. My face simply broke its own rules. "Oh, Lyra," she said, and the softness in her voice undid me further. I'm fine, I said, which was absurd because I was crying under an awning while buses hissed through puddles and a man in a raincoat pretended not to see me unravel near the route map. You do not sound fine. I think he's gone. Your boss? Yes. That's good, isn't it? Yes. My throat closed. Yes, it is. It's good. But I was not crying from relief. Not exactly. Relief would have been clean. This was grief with its coat on inside out. I cried for the years when he had not been gone. For the meetings where my smile had cost me something and I had paid anyway. For every time I had told myself it did not matter who received credit as long as the work was good. For the younger version of me who had believed talent would become visible if she made it undeniable enough. For the fact that someone had finally seen it, and instead of joy, my first response was mourning all the time when no one had. My mother stayed on the phone while I cried. She did not rush me toward gratitude. Librarians knew how to sit with silence. At last she said, "Being believed can hurt when you have spent a long time explaining yourself to no one." I pressed my fingers beneath my eyes. That is an annoyingly accurate sentence. I raised you. I have data. I laughed wetly. The bus arrived in a spray of water and light. I did not get on. I stood there with my phone against my ear and let the first bus leave without me, because for once, arriving efficiently did not feel like the point. The new dynamic did not announce itself with a title change. That would have been too simple. And Iris Vale, I was learning, distrusted simple fixes almost as much as she distrusted vague ones. Instead, an invitation appeared on my calendar for a transition strategy session at Vale's Seattle office the next morning. Then another. Then a request for me to join a small team auditing Astor Lane's market position, revenue structure, and creative reputation. My official title remained Senior Brand Strategist. My actual work moved several floors above the level where Marcus had once translated it into himself. Vial's office was in a quieter building downtown, 21 floors up, with views of rain moving across the city in sheets. It did not look like a place designed to impress clients. It looked like a place designed to think. The furniture was dark wood and pale leather. The conference rooms named after extinct printing presses. The coffee strong enough to qualify as a legal stimulant. People there spoke in complete sentences and read documents before meetings. I distrusted it immediately. The first week, I kept waiting for the trick. There is a particular way underused people respond to being given room. We do not stretch first. We check the walls for wires. I answered questions carefully. I documented decisions. I braced for correction when I disagreed. Iris noticed that too. We worked late the following Thursday. A working dinner, officially, at a small restaurant near Pioneer Square with brick walls, low light, and tables close enough that everyone pretended not to hear everyone else. 2 people from Vial's team came, along with Danny, who had been pulled into the voice audit and was attempting to behave like this did not thrill her. By 9, the others had peeled away under plausible excuses. Danny looked between Iris and me, smiled like a woman setting a controlled fire, and said she had a cat emergency. You don't have a cat, I said. That is what makes it an emergency. She left me with Iris, 2 marked-up strategy drafts, and the last of a bottle of red wine neither of us had ordered, but both of us had accepted. The restaurant emptied slowly around us. Chairs went up on tables in the back. Rain blurred the front windows until the streetlights became long gold wounds in the glass. Iris had taken off her blazer and rolled her sleeves once, not carelessly, but less formally than I had seen her. There was a small ink mark near her thumb. I noticed it with disproportionate interest. "You're staring at my hand," she said, without looking up from the draft. I considered denying it, then remembered she had access to revision histories and possibly my soul. "There's ink." She glanced at her thumb. "Occupational hazard." Acquisition firms have occupational ink hazards. I was a strategist before I was a buyer of broken rooms. Is that what you call companies? Huh. Only when I'm tired. It was the first time she had said something that sounded unguarded, simply because fatigue had moved faster than control. I looked at her more carefully. Beneath the precision, there were signs I had missed or not been permitted to see. The slight shadow under her eyes, the way she pressed two fingers to her temple between notes, the fact that her stillness was not effortless, but chosen. "Why acquisitions?" I asked. She leaned back. "That's a large question for 10:30. "I can ask a smaller one." "Don't." The word should have been cold. It was not. It was almost amused. She was quiet long enough that I thought she would let the question dissolve. Then she said, "Because talent is often trapped by people who are better at owning rooms than deserving them. Consulting lets you recommend. Acquisition lets you remove the lock." Is that always enough? No. The answer came too quickly. A server passed with a tray of glasses. Iris watched the movement, not really seeing it. Years ago, before Vale, I consulted for a design firm in Boston. There was a creative director there. Brilliant. Difficult in the way people call women difficult when they are tired of being translated badly. I saw what was happening. I documented it. I made recommendations. Her mouth tightened. The board thanked me and did nothing for 8 months. By the time they called me back, she was gone. Burned out, reputation damaged, half her portfolio attributed to the man who replaced her. I forgot the draft between us. What happened to her? She left the industry for a while, came back eventually on her own terms, but she should not have had to rebuild what other people stole. There it was. A slip in the composure. Not dramatic, not exposed, but real. The cost of precision was that she remembered exactly where it had failed. "I'm sorry," I said. Iris looked at me then. "So am I." The restaurant had gone nearly silent. A cook laughed somewhere behind the kitchen door. The rain kept touching the windows. I felt the air between us change, not into romance exactly, not yet, but into a kind of charged recognition. She had not rescued me because she enjoyed rescuing people. She had acted because once she had acted too late, and the memory had become part of her ethics. There was something devastating about being protected by a woman who did not consider protection sentimental. The trip to Portland happened the next week. Halcyon House wanted an in-person presentation at their flagship property, a restored hotel with brass elevators and a lobby that smelled like cedar, coffee, and money, pretending to be history. Iris decided I should lead the strategy portion. She said it in a meeting as if it were obvious. Marcus had once let me provide numbers from the edge of a table. Iris gave me the room and then stayed quiet while I took it. The presentation went well. Not flawlessly, because flawless was a word clients used before requesting impossible revisions, but well enough that the CEO of Halcyon leaned back and said, "This is the first time someone has described our problem without making us sound foolish." I thought of outnotice them. I thought of Iris asking why this feeling, why now? I thought of all the times I had edited my own intelligence into smaller shapes. On the flight back to Seattle, turbulence trapped us in conversation for nearly 2 hours. I hated flying and tried to hide it badly. Iris noticed before the first drop made my stomach turn. "Name 5 things in this cabin that are badly designed," she said, and because critique was apparently my emergency language, I named the tray tables, the safety card, the overhead lights, the seat pockets, and the boarding music with increasing indignation until my breathing steadied. In the dim cabin, with rain running over the oval window and a child crying 3 rows back, she looked less like a woman built for boardrooms and more like someone who had chosen composure because the alternative had once cost her too much. I asked whether she ever got tired of it. After a long pause, she said yes. We talked quietly through the weather, about her grandmother, who had taught her that numbers were only stories people could not make charming. About my old relationship with Peter, kind and bloodless, the sort of love that felt like being appreciated by a warm committee. "Reasonable things rarely require that much persuasion," Iris said, and the sentence lodged somewhere private. By the time we landed, my fear of the plane had been replaced by a more complicated fear of the woman beside me. At baggage claim, she lifted my suitcase before I could reach it, then offered me a ride home. "You don't need to," I said. "I know," she answered, and I took the ride because some invitations did not become safer when refused. The hotel lobby conversation happened in Portland 2 days later because Halcyon wanted a follow-up workshop and weather wanted drama. Our return train was delayed by flooding south of Tacoma, so we waited in the hotel lobby beneath a chandelier that looked like hundreds of glass raindrops suspended mid-fall. Vile's analyst had gone to make calls. The client team had scattered. Iris and I sat in deep green chairs near the fireplace, laptops closed for the first time in hours. "You should sleep," she said. "You say that as if you have personal experience with sleep." "I've read about it." I smiled into my coffee. The lobby was warm, expensive, and curated within an inch of its life. Outside, rain hammered the awning. A bellhop pushed a brass cart stacked with luggage. Somewhere behind us, a couple argued quietly about dinner reservations in the tone of people who had made luxury stressful. Iris looked toward the windows. "My father loved hotels." I stilled. She had never mentioned her parents. "He traveled constantly for work," she said. "When I was a child, he would send postcards from every city, not beautiful ones. He preferred ugly postcards, parking lots, conference centers, a motel sign shaped like a trout." "A trout?" "Cleveland, apparently." I laughed softly. "He died when I was 26, she said. "For years after, I disliked hotels. They felt like evidence that leaving could become a personality." The confession arrived quietly, without ceremony. Her face remained composed, but her thumb moved once along the seam of her coffee cup. "What changed?" I asked. "I started buying companies. Hotels became places between rooms where decisions had to be made before people lost more than necessary." "That sounds lonely." It often was. The fire clicked. Rain pressed its hands against the glass. I did not know what to do with Iris lonely. I could handle Iris precise, Iris ruthless, Iris observant enough to make me feel assembled. But lonely made her human in a way that threatened all the categories I was using to keep myself safe. She looked at me then. "Don't pity me." I wasn't. "No?" I was recognizing the logistics. That surprised a laugh out of her, small and real. It changed her face completely. The severity did not disappear. It became irrelevant, like a door opening onto a room with warmer light. I wanted to touch her. The realization was so direct, it nearly frightened me. Not a vague curiosity, not aesthetic admiration, not the abstract acknowledgement that Iris Vile was beautiful in a way that made silence look tailored. I wanted to place my hand over hers, where it rested near the coffee cup. I wanted to know whether her composure would hold if I touched the inside of her wrist. I wanted, and the want was not reasonable. Reasonable things rarely require that much persuasion. I set my coffee down before I could spill it. She noticed. "Lyra?" "I'm fine." People say that when they are choosing not to be precise. I closed my eyes briefly. "That is an annoying use of my own values against me." "I learned from watching you." The complication, when it finally became impossible to ignore, was not that I feared Iris would use power badly. I had seen people use power badly. I knew the smell of it, the little jokes that were not jokes, the generosity that came with hidden invoices, the way a man like Marcus could make you grateful for being robbed politely. Iris did not smell like that. She was careful with influence. She documented decisions. She gave credit so specifically it left no room for theft to grow in the corners. That was not the problem. The problem was that she had power at all. Technically, she was not my direct manager in the old sense. Practically, she controlled the transition, the budget, the future shape of the agency, and whether my career expanded into the space she had opened or contracted around a mistake. I could trust her intentions and still distrust the structure. In fact, trusting her made the structure more dangerous because desire could make a cage look like shelter if the light hit it right. Danny diagnosed the problem over dumplings in the tiny restaurant near the office, where the windows fogged in winter and the owner knew our emotional support order. "You're spiraling," she said. I told her I was analyzing. She told me analysis had become a trench coat for panic. When I said Iris was technically my employer, Danny did not wave it away. "Good. Be serious about that," she said. "I am not here to tell you power imbalance is romantic because a hot woman with cheekbones read your strategy memos." Then her expression softened, which meant the truth was about to arrive without mercy. "But you're not only worried about the org chart. You're not afraid she'll hurt you. You're afraid you'll let her." The restaurant noise seemed to move back. Danny leaned closer. "You spent years surviving Marcus by making yourself small enough to be overlooked. Iris looks at you and you get bigger. That is terrifying because it means you have to stop pretending your life is safer when you ask for nothing." I hated her a little for being right. Before we left, she squeezed my wrist and said, "I want you happy, not promoted instead of happy." Happy, but make her prove she understands the difference. The overheard call happened by accident a few mornings later. I arrived early at Vael's office and heard Iris through a half-open conference room door. "No," she said, calm enough to be lethal. "I understand what the numbers say. I also understand who produced the recovery plan you are now describing as leadership instinct. Do not insult me by repackaging labor in real time." I froze beside the kitchenette, caught between manners and revelation. Her voice was not public then. It was private, tired, and edged with years of having the same argument with different men. "This is not a tone issue," she continued. "This is an attribution issue." I should have walked away. Instead, I heard her insist that retention packages would follow contribution rather than visibility, and that stopping punishment disguised as culture was not the same as punishing people. When she emerged, I pretended to be deeply interested in coffee lids. She saw through me immediately. "How much did you hear?" "Enough to know Richard had a bad morning." For once, a laugh escaped her before she could discipline it. Hearing her fight for people with no audience made everything worse in the best possible way. It made the structure no less real, and my wanting no easier to dismiss. Late September became October. The agency's reworked studio space emerged from weeks of contractors, new workflows, and emotional dust. Walls came down. Teams that had been siloed by leadership politics were moved closer together. A small library of old campaign archives appeared where Marcus's office had been, which Danny called a shrine to consequences. My role expanded without being announced as a miracle. I led strategy reviews. I signed off on frameworks. Clients began sending follow-up questions to me directly, which felt both satisfying and like discovering a secret door in a room I had lived in for years. Iris and I worked together constantly. That was the trouble. Proximity is not neutral when the person beside you has become a question your body wants to answer. She read my drafts with ruthless care. I challenged her assumptions because she expected me to. We argued about market positioning and resource allocation, and whether an agency could be intimate at scale without turning intimacy into a product feature. The work was real. The admiration was real. The thing underneath was real enough that pretending not to feel it became another job. The rupture came on a Thursday night in the reworked studio after everyone else had left or been gently bullied home by Danny. Rain hit the skylights with steady fingers. The room smelled of fresh paint, whiteboard markers, and the last coffee someone had abandoned in a paper cup near the printer. We were reviewing the final creative direction for Astor Lane's relaunch, a campaign built around the idea of returned authorship. My concept used fragments of process, sketches, rejected lines, the messy evidence behind polished work. Iris thought it risked turning internal repair into public theater. You're asking the market to applaud our ethics, she said, standing near the wall where the layouts were pinned. I'm asking the market to understand what changed. Those are not the same thing. They can be if the work is honest. Honesty used as positioning becomes performance very quickly. I turned from the table. So we say nothing? We just reappear with cleaner leadership and hope clients intuit the moral architecture. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Don't caricature my point. Then don't reduce mine. The silence after that had teeth. Iris looked at the wall again. The strongest version of this work does not explain that credit matters. It proves it by giving the team visible authorship in the campaign itself. Names, process, ownership, less manifesto, more evidence. It was a good note. I hated that it was a good note. That would expose people, I said. It would invite them. Not everyone wants visibility just because they deserved it. No. Which is why consent matters. I laughed once, sharp and humorless. Consent. Great. Let's talk about that. Iris turned fully toward me. All right. The steadiness in her voice made me angrier because I could not accuse it of anything. You keep saying ownership and authorship and consent-like structures become clean because the language is clean. My voice shook. I hated that. But you're still the structure. You're still the person with the power to decide who gets invited, who gets protected, who gets named, who gets removed. Her face changed. Lyra. No, I need to say this before I lose the nerve or turn it into a strategy note. I stepped back from the table. My heart was beating too hard. I don't know how to want something this much from someone who has this much structural power over my life. There. The sentence entered the room and made everything else impossible. Iris did not move. I kept going because stopping would have killed me. I know you're careful. I know you're not Marcus. I know this isn't the same. But I have spent years watching power make itself attractive by being necessary. I have spent years making myself small enough to be safe, useful enough to keep, quiet enough not to threaten anyone. And then you came in and said you had been watching my work, and you said, now you only answer to me. And I have not been able to get that sentence out of my chest since. Her breath changed. Barely. I heard it anyway. I don't know whether it feels like a door opening or a door closing, I said. I don't know whether being seen by you is liberation or just another way to become dependent on someone else's gaze. I don't know how to separate the part of me that wants the work from the part of me that wants you, and I hate that I can't make those categories behave. My voice broke on the last word. Not loudly, just enough. The rain kept falling. The city beyond the skylights glowed dim and wet. Iris stood very still, and for the first time since I had known her, her composure did not look like certainty. It looked like restraint, chosen at cost. When she spoke, her voice was quiet. Are you finished? I almost flinched. Then I understood she was not reprimanding me. She was asking whether there was more truth that deserved room. I think so, I said. The silence stretched long enough to frighten me. Then Iris said, I bought the company to stop watching someone else take credit for you. I want you to answer to me because I intend to deserve it. The words hit harder than if she had touched me. She continued, and now there was something raw beneath the precision. But intention does not erase structure. Admiration does not make power harmless. And my wanting you, which I will not insult either of us by pretending I do not, does not give me the right to ask you to carry the risk of my position. My hands had gone cold. Iris. No, let me be precise too. Let me be precise. She looked at me fully. I have wanted to kiss you since Portland. I have wanted to hear you say my name without checking whether the room allowed it. I have wanted many things that would be easy to dress up as inevitability because we are both intelligent and exhausted and very good at making desire sound like logic. A laugh caught in my throat. almost a sob. But I will not become another person who benefits from your ability to endure ambiguity, she said. If there is anything personal between us, it cannot exist inside a reporting line. It cannot depend on your gratitude. It cannot ask you to trust my character while ignoring the architecture around us. I looked at her through the blur in my eyes. What are you saying? I'm saying you're right. It should have felt victorious. It felt devastating. She looked back at the pinned layouts. And I'm saying we should stop for tonight before either of us says something true in the wrong order. I almost asked her not to go. The words rose, humiliating and bright. I swallowed them because for once not asking was not self-erasure. It was care. Okay, I said. Iris gathered her coat. At the door, she paused. Lyra. I looked up. The door is opening, she said, but you decide whether to walk through it. Not me. Then she left me standing in the studio with rain above me, my work on the walls, and a sentence that did not solve anything but change the shape of the unsolved thing. The days after were careful. Not cold. Cold would have been easier because it would have given me something simple to survive. Instead, Iris became exact in her distance. Meetings stayed professional. Emails were clear. She did not linger in doorways or create private moments disguised as work. She credited me in rooms with the same precision as before, but without the intimate pressure of looking too long after. It was a kindness and a punishment, and, more annoyingly, the right thing. I hated it for 48 hours. Danny brought me a cookie the size of a legal document and sat on the edge of my desk. You look like someone canceled a war you were emotionally prepared to fight. I told her everything. Define everything. I said I wanted her. Danny's eyebrows went up. Not in those exact words. She said it more clearly. Of course she did. That woman probably alphabetizes vulnerability. I pressed my forehead to my hands. She agreed with me about the power imbalance. Good. And now she's being appropriate. Horrifying. I know you're mocking me. I am supporting you with texture. I looked at her. What if appropriate means it stops? Her face softened. Then it stops before it becomes something that hurts you. That's mature and I dislike it? Same. But it did not stop. It settled. There was a difference. Something fundamental had reorganized, not into ease, but into honesty. The conversation was too large to pretend it had not happened, so we did not pretend. We worked around it carefully, like people moving through a room after an earthquake, aware of what had fallen, what had held, what might still shift. On the fourth day, I received a text from Iris at 7:12 in the morning while I was standing in my kitchen waiting for toast. I have finalized a structural adjustment that should have been made independently of our conversation, but our conversation clarified the urgency. Effective Monday, Astor Lane will bring in an independent executive creative director for the transition period. You will report to that role for all agency operations and creative approvals. Your work with Vielle will continue on strategic oversight only through cross-functional sessions, not direct supervision. Compensation adjustment and title review are attached for your consideration. No response is required before you have reviewed everything fully. A second message arrived. This is not a withdrawal. It is a correction. I read both messages once, then again. Then a third time, with my toast burning gently in the background. The first message did read like a legal brief. The second did not. The second was Iris, with her hand briefly visible beneath the architecture. I sat at my small kitchen table, while smoke from the toaster made my apartment smell like consequences. My phone lay in front of me. Outside, rain moved softly down the window. I thought of all the ways people had used uncertainty to keep me flexible. We'll discuss your growth next quarter. We all know this was a team effort. Visibility comes with time. Be patient. Trust the process. Iris had not asked me to trust the process. She had changed the process. I typed, "Thank you." I deleted it. Too small. I typed, "I saw this. I deleted that too. Too corporate." Finally, I wrote, "I'm reading it carefully, and I understand what you changed." Her response came 6 minutes later. Good. Then, after a pause, long enough that I imagined her deciding whether to send the rest, another message appeared. "I would like you to understand why." I did. That was the trouble. Understanding had become less safe than confusion. The independent creative director arrived the next week in the form of Naomi Pierce, a 50-year-old woman with cropped gray hair, red glasses, and the energy of someone who had once made a CEO cry in a budget meeting and considered it a balanced outcome. I loved her immediately. She reviewed the relaunch work, asked 3 terrifying questions, praised Danny's copy with the solemnity of a priest recognizing a miracle, and told me my strategic architecture was annoyingly elegant. "Is that good?" I asked. "It's inconveniently good. That is better." Naomi reported to the board transition committee, not Iris. I reported to Naomi. The chain was clear, almost aggressively so. Iris attended key sessions but did not approve my daily work. The absence of her authority did not make her less present. It made her presence cleaner. In one meeting, Naomi challenged a client-facing line I had written for the relaunch. Before Iris could speak, I defended it. Not because Iris might agree, not because I wanted to impress her, because I believed I was right. Naomi argued back. Danny contributed a metaphor involving haunted houses. The analyst looked afraid. Iris sat across the table, silent, watching with an expression I could not read until the meeting ended and she passed me in the hallway. "You didn't look at me once," she said. I stopped. "During the argument?" "Yes." "Was I supposed to?" "No." There was a warmth under the word that made my chest tighten. I looked at her. The hallway was busy enough to be safe. People moved around us with folders and coffee and the urgent purposelessness of office life. "Good." Her mouth softened. "Good." That was all. It was enough to unsettle my entire afternoon. The relaunch went live in late October, not as a manifesto, but as evidence. Campaign pages named the people who made the work. Case studies showed process with permission, sketches beside strategy, drafts beside finished lines, authorship treated not as decoration, but infrastructure. The response came quickly enough to make everyone nervous. Former clients emailed, new prospects asked for meetings. A trade publication wrote about Astor Lane rebuilding around creative credit, and Danny taped the article where Marcus's office door had been. "Subtle," I said. "I considered a shrine candle," she replied. My title changed to strategy director. The compensation adjustment made me stare at the screen until Danny whispered, "Blink if money is happening." I called my mother from the stairwell, and when she said she was proud of me, I cried for a different reason than before. Joy had weight too. I was still learning how to hold it without apologizing. As for Iris, we entered a season of almosts. Almost a touch when she handed me a marked draft. Almost a confession outside a client dinner while fog softened the water. Almost an invitation when she asked whether I had plans, and Naomi appeared with a production question, like a woman sent by ethics itself. The almosts were no longer stolen from unsafe rooms. They were allowed to remain incomplete, which made them cleaner and somehow more powerful. One Friday evening, after a difficult presentation, Iris and I found ourselves alone in the agency kitchen. The office was dim, the windows silver with rain, and she was searching a cabinet that contained only coffee, stale crackers, and one disgraceful box of peppermint tea. "How are you?" she asked. "Better," I said, still scared. She did not flinch. "Of me?" "Sometimes, not because I think you'll hurt me on purpose. Because purpose is not the only way harm happens." I smiled despite the ache in my chest. "You make reasonable sound erotic, which is very inconvenient." For one perfect second, Iris lost composure. A blink, a caught breath, the faintest color at her cheek. I loved the way my name sounded when she said it like a warning to herself. I told her the structure had changed, and that I had changed with it. Her eyes softened so openly I had to grip the counter. I know, she said, and from Iris, I know meant she had seen the work, the cost, and the choice becoming possible. Someone laughed near the elevators, returning the office to us. Iris stepped away first. You should go enjoy your team's celebration. Our team, I said. She shook her head gently. Your team, Lyra. I watched her leave and thought that, now you only answer to me, had changed again. It sounded less like possession than a question returned to my own hands. The Sunday I went to Iris's house, there was no professional pretext left to hide behind. That was why it took me 20 minutes to knock. Her house was in Queen Anne, tucked on a quiet street where wet leaves plastered themselves to the sidewalk and old trees held the morning rain in their branches. It was not enormous in the way I had absurdly feared. It was a narrow, beautiful house with dark blue siding, white trim, and a porch light that remained on even though the day was pale and brightening. The kind of house that looked lived in by someone who made deliberate choices and then forgot to perform them for visitors. I stood at the gate with my hands in the pockets of my deep green coat and considered leaving. I had not texted. That was unlike me. I had become the sort of woman who updated shared documents with clean version names and sent calendar holds for difficult conversations. Showing up unannounced at the home of the woman I wanted felt like reckless behavior performed by a stranger with my face. But the thing about being seen accurately is that eventually invisibility starts to feel rude. I walked up the path and knocked. For a moment, nothing happened. I heard movement inside, the soft thud of footsteps, a muffled sound that might have been a cabinet closing. Then the door opened and Iris stood there wearing reading glasses, an old gray sweater, black lounge pants, and no shoes. Her hair was slightly mussed. She held a mug of coffee in one hand. There was a faint crease on her cheek, as if she had fallen asleep on a book or a badly placed sleeve. I had seen Iris in boardrooms, conference rooms, restaurants, hotel lobbies, town cars, airplanes, and offices designed for careful thought. I had seen her precise, tired, angry, amused, vulnerable by degrees. I had never seen her look so humanly imperfect. It nearly ruined me. Lyra, she said, and my name came out unguarded. I should have called. Yes, I didn't. I noticed. I can go. No. The word landed between us. Not command, not possession. Invitation, stripped of everything unnecessary. She stepped back. I entered. Her house smelled like coffee, old paper, and rain-wet wood. The entryway held a narrow table stacked with mail, a bowl of keys, and a pair of leather gloves. The living room beyond was lined with bookshelves, not arranged by color or performance, but by use, some shelves double-stacked, some books bristling with notes. A navy blanket lay folded over the arm of a worn sofa. On the coffee table sat an open book, a pencil, and the ugly blue-striped mug from Viel's office, which had apparently earned visitation rights. You have two ugly mugs, I said, because my emotional range had limitations. Iris closed the door behind me. I have a collection. That is not a defense. It wasn't meant to be. We stood in the entryway, too aware of our hands. Coffee? She asked. Yes. In her kitchen, morning light spread over white counters and a wooden table marked with small scratches. A pot of rosemary sat on the windowsill. Rain clung to the glass in bright beads. Nothing about the room was dramatic. That was what made it feel sacred. No city behind glass, no client deck, no org chart, no assistant closing a conference room door. Just Iris barefoot in her own kitchen, pouring coffee into a mug that said Montana State Library Conference 2009 in faded green letters. This is the worst one yet, I said. It has sentimental value. To whom? To me, unfortunately. I took the mug. Our fingers did not brush because she was careful. I was tired of careful being the only thing keeping us honest. I came because I didn't want another almost, I said. Iris set down the coffee pot. Her reading glasses were still on. They should not have made her look more dangerous. They did. All right, she said quietly. I'm still serious about everything I said. The power, the structure, the part where wanting can make people stupid, and then they call it destiny because that sounds better than negligence. Her mouth moved slightly. Accurate. But the structure changed. Not perfectly, because nothing is perfect and I'm not 12, but cleanly enough that my choices feel like mine again. I held the warm mug with both hands, and I want to make one. The kitchen was very still. Iris looked at me as if any sudden movement might turn the moment into something less real. What choice? I set the mug on the counter. My hands were shaking again. This time, I let them. You. Her composure broke so quietly, most people would have missed it. I did not. A breath, a softening around the eyes. The tiny collapse of a woman who had held herself upright for so long that receiving something directly required courage. Lyra, she said. I stepped closer. Do you want me to leave? No. Do you want me to stop? No. The second no was lower. It moved through me like heat. Then tell me the thing you would say if you weren't trying to deserve restraint more than happiness. For a moment, Iris did not answer. Then she lifted one hand and removed her glasses, setting them on the counter with care that felt almost like delay. When she looked at me again, there was nothing corporate in her face, nothing distant, nothing that belonged to rooms with glass walls. I want you here, she said. Not because of your work, not instead of it, not as proof that I was right to see you. I want you here because when you are in a room, I feel required to be more honest than I planned. Because your mind moves like weather, I want to stand inside. Because you make me less interested in being untouchable. My throat tightened. She stepped closer now. And because I have wanted to kiss you for so long that not kissing you has become its own form of speech. I smiled, unsteady. That was very precise. I was motivated. I touched her first. Just my fingers against the inside of her wrist, where I had once imagined touching her in a hotel lobby and frightened myself with the wanting. Her skin was warm. Her pulse moved beneath my fingertips, quick enough to tell me restraint had not been calm for either of us. Iris looked down at my hand. When she looked back up, the last architecture between us gave way. Our first kiss happened in her kitchen with morning light on the counters and rain shining at the window. It was not cinematic in the way I would have once imagined. There was no sweeping music, no city skyline, no dramatic confession timed to thunder. The coffee pot clicked behind us. My hip bumped the cabinet. Iris made a soft sound against my mouth that ruined every reasonable thought I had ever had. She kissed with the same attention she brought to everything, which should have surprised no one and still nearly took my knees out from under me. Not hurried, not claiming, present. Her hand rose to my face, thumb touching the line of my cheek with a gentleness so exact it made something inside me ache. I gripped the edge of her sweater because I needed proof that she was not an idea, not a force, not a door, but a woman standing in front of me, warm and real and trembling slightly when I moved closer. The kiss deepened. Heat gathered slowly, honestly, without stealing the room from the tenderness. I had been wanted before in ways that felt flattering, comfortable, kind. This felt accurate. As if Iris had reached not for the easiest version of me, not the useful one, not the invisible one, but the whole, difficult shape, and found it worth holding. When we parted, neither of us moved far. Iris rested her forehead lightly against mine. Are you all right? I laughed, breathless. I think that depends on your definition of all right. My definitions are flexible this morning. That is new for you. She smiled, a real smile, private and devastating. I'm evolving. We stood there like that for a while, close enough that language became optional. Outside, a car moved through wet leaves. Somewhere in the house, an old radiator clicked. The world did not transform. There was no grand correction of every lonely year, no magical repayment for the time I had spent being unseen. But something arrived. Not a beginning, exactly. Beginnings were too simple. This felt like reaching a place that had been waiting without demanding that we hurry toward it. Eventually, Iris brushed a strand of hair back from my face. Stay for breakfast? I should warn you, I judge kitchens by toast quality. I can meet rigorous standards. You own conference mugs from defunct institutions. I'm not sure I trust you. You came here anyway. I looked at her, at the reading glasses on the counter, the coffee cooling beside them, the morning unfolding without witness. Yes, I said. I did. We made breakfast badly. That seemed important. Iris burned the first piece of toast because I kissed her against the counter and she forgot she owned a toaster. I oversalted the eggs because she stood behind me, not touching, simply close, and apparently proximity to happiness damaged my motor skills. We ate at the wooden table while rain lifted slowly from the windows and the city brightened into a pale, washed blue. She told me about the first company she ever tried to save and failed. I told her about being 23 and thinking professional invisibility meant I was mature. She admitted she had read the Meridian revision history 3 times because she was angry enough to mistrust the accuracy of her own anger. I admitted I had looked up her Forbes interview after the acquisition and been annoyed by how beautiful she was before I was allowed to be annoyed by anything else. You were annoyed? She asked. Deeply, it was inconvenient to my objectivity. Your objectivity survived. Barely. She smiled into her coffee. I wanted, absurdly, to earn that smile for years. Later, standing at her front door with my coat half-buttoned and her fingers caught lightly in my sleeve, I thought again of the first time she had said it. Now you only answer to me. I had turned the sentence over for weeks, searching it for threat, promise, escape, dependency. It had been all those things because I had not yet understood the truest part. Answering to Iris had never meant becoming smaller beneath her authority. Not when she said it right. Not when I chose what came after. It meant being met by someone who intended to be worthy of my answer. It meant that when I spoke, she would listen with the seriousness my life had always deserved. It meant I could answer from my full height. Iris opened the door, then paused. Will I see you tomorrow? At work? Yes. And outside work? Her eyes warmed. If you choose. There it was, the door, open, my hand, my decision. I stepped close and kissed her once more, softer than before, because we had time now and I wanted to learn the shape of not rushing. Tomorrow, I said. I left her house beneath a sky that had finally stopped raining. The sidewalks shone, the air smelled of wet leaves and coffee, and my phone buzzed with a message from Danny that said, well, followed by 7 eye emojis and 1 knife. I laughed so loudly a crow startled from the curb. For years, I had thought being chosen accurately would feel like vindication, a room of people finally admitting what had always been true. There was some of that, the title, the credit, my name attached to my own work. But the deeper feeling was quieter. Being chosen accurately meant I could no longer hide inside being misunderstood. It meant my hunger had evidence, my talent had witnesses, my wanting had a name. At the bus stop, Iris texted, "Your umbrella is still here." I looked at the message and laughed because I had brought no umbrella. "Is that your professional assessment?" I wrote. Her answer came a moment later. "It is an invitation with plausible deniability." I leaned back against the glass shelter, smiling at the gray bright city, and typed, "I'll come get it tonight." No plausible deniability needed. Good, she wrote. Only that? Good. It was enough. The bus came, ordinary and shining, and carried me back toward the life that had once made me invisible and now had to make room for the person I had become. I did not know everything that would happen. I knew love would not excuse us from ethics, and being seen once did not mean I would never have to insist on my own visibility again. But I also knew this. I had answered. Not to Marcus, not to the room, not to the old structures that had taught me survival as a substitute for desire. I had answered from the full, unhidden place in me. And somewhere in Queen Anne, in a kitchen bright with morning and rain, Iris Vielle had heard me.